Hey there, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of The Finnovator with me, Stuart Bell, a business coach and creator of the Practice Evolutions coaching program. A lot of people would know the quote, "What gets measured gets managed." And it was interesting. I was putting together a training session for our recent bulletproof pricing fast track training program. And I wanted to include this quote, but I'm always really interested whenever I'm using a quote in the origin of it. And in particular, I've noticed down the years that more and more quotes tend to get misattributed. So I dived in to try and understand where this quote around what gets measured gets managed came from. And in many cases, it's attributed to Peter Drucker, who is an incredible management consultant who's added a significant amount of knowledge and insight to the considerable body of work that is management consulting. But in this case, I soon discovered that attributing it to Mr. Drucker was in fact not correct. And the deeper you went into it, you started to realize that the first recorded origin of this statement, what gets measured gets managed, came in 1956 by a gentleman called V.F. Ridgway, who wrote a paper called Dysfunctional Consequences of Performance Measurements. In actual fact, his kind of quote was misattributed and mistranslated. And what he actually said was he was talking about the fact that often this idea that what gets measured gets managed is believed to be the panacea to everything. But in truth, it really does depend on what the outcome is supposed to be. And he made the observation often measuring the wrong things just for the sake of measurement will result in terrible outcomes. Or, as I like to paraphrase it in the session, what gets measured, as long as it's worthwhile and beneficial to the organization to do so, should be so it gets managed. And in kicking off today's episode, which is a sharing a live session that I ran actually in 2023. So this is a really recent one called Metrics That Matter, obviously. I wanted to share that often metrics are one of those things that either businesses overdo and they really don't think about whether or not these are the right things to manage. They measure outcomes instead of activity. Or alternatively, it's something that just falls to the wayside, and often because it's just too hard to do. And this is one of the problems that I used to see when I did a lot of benchmarking with practices back in the day. Large data sets, you often have a lot of practices who just don't have systems for recording this. So when you go and ask them to come up with information, they're coming up with things on the fly. And as a result, you get that whole rubbish in, rubbish out. Hopefully, this is going to help because let's be honest, in the sphere of what I do, when I'm trying to manage or coach a business without clear metrics that we can all be accountable for, measure that can give us a sense of what's going on, pipeline tracking, all that sort of thing, so important to me. I went and built a whole web app around it called Finsight. It's very easy for things to drift off track. So hopefully this will give you a bit of an insight, not just in how to track metrics that are relevant to an advice business, but how to do it in a way where it becomes part of your DNA. It becomes something that happens as you do what you do and ultimately produces insightful input that's easy to collect. So hopefully you enjoy this. As always, if you do, please take a moment to leave some feedback and leave a review. Other than that, let's get stuck into Metrics That Matter. Today I want to talk about something that I think is possibly one of the more important things in business, but something that gets overlooked, and that's metrics. Obviously, as part of a lot of your 90-day plans, you've been very kind of getting back to us and give us an idea of what you'd like to achieve. But one of the things in looking at kind of the metrics is to realize that maybe we need to do a bit of work on what kind of metrics are relevant, what sort of things you should be measuring in an advice business, how to work that out, and also, of course, what to set. Now, there's a few different uses for this. The first usage is you can use it just to track your own progress. The second usage is if you've got staff members. For example, I know I was talking to Lisa from Infinity the other day, and she's looking at a bunch of stuff around how you measure the success of your employees. This can be incredibly useful for them as well as just generally having a discussion around how to do it. Now, having come from corporate, I know that there's a lot of people out there who are really super keen on this whole smarter metrics, all that sort of stuff. And you know what? I've always kind of looked at smart metrics or smart measurables and thought, yeah, that's really great, but maybe it's more of a corporate thing. But I think the more and more I've progressed in working with businesses and working my own business, the more I've realized that getting really, really clear about the metrics, about what you're going to measure, it's almost like a non-negotiable. And the faster you can get your head around it and make it part of the way you act and the way you just behave, I think the easier it is to understand the drivers of success. The big idea is this. I've had a look at a whole bunch of research into what people have to say about metrics. And the one thing that comes out time and time again is the fact is you don't often hear business leaders stick their head up above the parapet and say, you know what? I don't worry about the metrics. I don't care about that sort of stuff. They all tend to come out with indications that give me a feeling that this is kind of something that's actually pretty important. Most successful people you see and talk to and hear from, they indicate that they're really important. I mean, Bill Gates had this to say, which I think is really relevant, particularly at the moment. He made the point that you have to have a certain realism with government. It's a pretty blunt instrument, and without clear metrics, they can kind of have the ability to fall into doing things not very well. And if it's coming from Bill Gates, that's a man who's had a fair amount to do with the legislation. The big idea here is, I have the view, and I kind of putting it forward, that if you're driving or you're trying to do things where you don't necessarily have insight into the clear metrics, I know this will be preaching to the converted for a lot of you, but if you don't necessarily have a clear idea, you're kind of like driving blind. You're going along with a sense of there's stuff going on, but not necessarily seeing what the impact is, or alternatively being able to predict what's going to happen. I think there's probably three main reasons that many firms don't track metrics. The first one for me is, we used to run these reports back in the day when I was at Hill Ross, where we'd kind of pay a bunch of money. We'd get one of these practice management firms to come in and, get a bunch of data, and then they'd spit out this information. And two things would happen. You knew darn well, or I knew darn well, that the businesses didn't have any standard way of collecting the data. So when they were actually being asked to produce the data, they were kind of pulling it out of whatever systems they had left, right, and center. And you also knew that when the data was presented to the businesses, there was no kind of next step. It was like, your clients say you're awesome, or your conversion rates are X%, or your growth over the last 12 months has looked like this, but it wasn't useful. It didn't turn into action. And the truth is, there's this common saying, which is, if you put rubbish into something, you get rubbish out. And that's why I think a lot of businesses sometimes don't bother with the metrics side of things, because they don't trust the data and they don't really know what to do with the data when it comes out the other side. I think the other thing is, some of the metrics that people tend to look at when you do get the report, I question whether they are actually things that matter. I think a lot of the time, the metrics that you get are more about the historical performance. They're looking in the rearview mirror, and it becomes really hard to take those metrics and project them forward in any meaningful kind of way. And the problem is, if you're just getting information which is looking behind you, the extrapolation to turn into something that's going to motivate your action is quite challenging on a number of different levels. The final thing is, to your point, Brett, if you have a situation where, you've got metrics and you're the one driving it, you're the one collecting it, and everybody else is kind of just in your team is kind of just ignoring it or assuming that it's just your thing. Well, it kind of defeats the objective of doing it in the first place, if that makes sense. So we want to get a situation where you're not just the one who's collecting it all the time, but other people are kind of involved too. I noticed my screen has just dropped out, isn't it? Can anyone see my slides? Let's try that again. Give us 2 secs, ladies and gents. Oh, this is quality. No, I'm back. Okay, just a sec. So, look, while I'm doing this, I'm going to talk in, try and do two things. I think the problem is, if you don't get this right, you kind of end up with this sense that there's something kind of missing, that there's one piece of information that potentially could solve a bunch of problems, but somehow you don't have it. And as a result, you're forced often to kind of I wouldn't say make things up, but definitely experiment in areas and try and work out what's going on here and what's going on there, because you don't have the data. It's kind of like navigating without a map. It's not very useful. If you do get this right and you do track your metrics, 3 things happen. You get a really pinpoint focus. You're able to go, this is what I'm focused on. And you start to look at the data and it guides you. One of the best things is you get predictive insight. What I mean by this is, for example, if you come along to the Crystal Moneyball, or you're using FinMan in your business, you'll know that one of the great things about that tool is it enables you to have a look at your revenue or have a look at your pipeline and predict forward 3 months to say, you know what? The next 3 months, we've got lots of opportunity. And that kind of means that we may want to get on with actually crunching through some of the work at the moment. Because if we bring on board more people, we're potentially loading stuff on, or you could predict that, we might need to outsource some stuff over the next 3 months just to bring the revenue in. Alternatively, if you're doing that, you can predict forward and say, you know what, we've got some revenue coming in. We've got lots of work on at the moment, but there's not much in the pipeline ahead. So we might want to switch into a marketing mode soon. The really important thing is, if you've got these metrics and the way you go about gathering them that I'm going to show you is you get people in your business to own it. Let me explain the sort of picture here. My daughter Hermione, she does what's called special news. I think it's about 3 times every 3 weeks. She has to go along to the class. We know it as show and tell when we were growing up, but it's called special news. Now, the interesting thing about special news, I think about this from the teacher's point of view.
because Hermione gets really excited about it and other kids get really excited about it. But this process of giving people the opportunity to say, you know what, you've got an opportunity here to define what you're going to present to the rest of the group. That ownership, you're a teacher at the back and you're stepping back and you're watching all this class and they're essentially running this. And that's kind of what I want for you. I want you to be able to engage your people in your business, get them to understand what they can influence and what KPIs are really important for them. And as a result, they kind of own this side of things. Does that make sense? If we get this right, most importantly, I think we get a bit of a feedback loop going. In other words, we can kind of choose something to do, right? We're going to work on this. Then what we do is we work on it, we perform it, we get some real feedback, and then we can work out how to improve things. Because if we don't have that feedback loop, we find it really hard. We can only find out that things aren't working later on. So there's a bit of a practical case study. Sort of late last year, we got really, really, really clear about who owned what in our business and what the metrics were. Probably clearer than ever before because we were starting to notice some things that were dropping off. Some people who maybe weren't taking ownership of things. And instantly, by really knuckling down on the KPIs, we were able to identify instances where people were dropping the ball. It became super clear. And what's more, we were able to identify the people that were having a demonstrable impact. What was the impact of this? Well, the impact was when you pull those KPIs out, you understand what areas aren't working, you know where to focus, and more importantly, you demonstrate to everybody that you kind of have visibility over where it's not going and you have the opportunity to make changes. There's another story I want to tell you because it's really relevant. This guy, Phil Libben, was one of the founders of Evernote. And the reason I put these two photos in front of you, by the way, this is an image which would never get up on Facebook, is because Phil did a really interesting experiment. As you can see, he reached a point in his life where he decided he wasn't happy with his body mass. And so he decided he was going to do something about it, but he approached it in a really interesting way. He identified that he thought he was, 28 pounds overweight. In other words, he wanted to lose 10 kilos. So he marked on a spreadsheet what his weight was now and then mapped out 6 months worth of weeks and basically divided his weight loss by the number of weeks they were and then basically tracked his weight over that time. Did nothing different. Didn't go on a diet, just tracked his weight every week. And sure enough, within that 6 month period, he lost the 28 pounds or the 10 kilos or whatever it is, or a little bit more than 10 kilos. Why is this the case? Well, he says he didn't change anything, but here's the thing. The act of getting clear on what those metrics are and paying attention to them, he is pretty clear on the fact that that drove very small changes in his behavior. It brought his focus back to those things. And that's really what we're talking about here today. We're talking about you getting really, really clear about the outcome you're trying to drive in certain areas, the metric that's associated with it, and just giving the opportunity to start to track it at a more habitual level, if that makes sense. So let me know. I've sort of spoken through a few problems. I've talked about, rubbish in, rubbish out. I've talked about measuring things that don't matter. I've talked about you're the only one tracking it, as well as the outcomes. Tell me a bit, what do you feel you want to improve most? What area is most important to you when it comes to improving the way that you use metrics? Is it around the team? Is it around knowing what the metrics are? Is it around getting good data? Is it about simplifying the process? Is it about focusing? Let me know. Put it in the box. I'd love to know. Where do you feel that you'd like to improve most when it comes to your metrics, your KPIs, whatever you want to call them? Michael says, I think ownership and having the team determine what the right metrics are makes heaps of sense. I agree. There's this whole sort of, ownership is really important. And it gets bandied around a lot in corporate settings. But ultimately, if we look at our phones, we take ownership of these phones because we put up family photos on them. We load our own apps. And it's that process of personalization, of having the ability to turn around and say, this is mine. I created it. That has a lot to do with it. Connie McCaig of OneView once I went along to an evening that she spoke at, and she said the same thing. She said she takes a lot of time at the upfront piece to get people on board, to engage them, to get them to define what the value is going to be, because she thinks it's easier to invest time there than it is to come back and try and get them to play catch up. I know EY, about maybe 12 months, maybe longer ago, put in place a new performance management system where they're asking, instead of going, here are your targets, they sit down and they go, what value are you going to create for this project? And they took it from there. Brett says, wants confirmation that I'm measuring the metrics and outcomes. I can totally help with that. And Elizabeth, how to interpret and what's the best and most appropriate metric? Perfect, which means that we have the right content. Okay, let's dive in. So, right, if you got anything, jump in there. Okay, let's start with the fundamentals. as always, because there's kind of a process to it, and there's also a couple of things you've got to get right. The first one is define functions. Now, you know what? Whenever I hear people talk about departments, I tend to think that's a big business thing. But the real truth is, I think there is real value. Doesn't matter how big or small you are, in starting to think about your big business in terms of what it would look like if it was bigger, and actually asking those questions to the department. Now, I know that as principals and people who've started the business, you tend to do everything, right? But as a business grows, if you don't start to organize things, it tends to become just a business with a central person and everyone else kind of running around supporting it. And that isn't the most scalable thing. My own experience is, Hiroshi Mikitani, I think he's the founder of Rambutan, the Japanese online selling site. He talked about the fact that businesses completely transform every time they go through a 1 or a 3. In other words, a sole business is completely different by the time it hits 2 or 3. When it goes from 3 to 4 and 5, again, it completely changes. And then again, when it hits the 10, the 30, the 100, the 300, in other words, what worked for that business before will no longer work. There's a whole bunch of reasons for it, a lot around communication. We had this own experience of where when we hit about 4, I suddenly started to notice that we were getting in each other's way. I had discussions with Nina about Rose crossing over with her work. I started to talk to the team about how I was getting in the way. So the first thing we can do is start to think about your business as a big business and asking, what are the departments that exist? And I'm going to give you the 8 when we get around to it. But essentially, the departments that exist in your business are your management department, who manages the business, your marketing department, your sales department or new client engagement, your advice department, your client management department, your operations, in other words, that runs the back office, your HR department and your IT department. Now, I don't care if all of that stuff is managed by you. If you're a sole practitioner, then obviously that's going to be managed by you. By the way, if there's more people in your business and you're still managing it all, that's probably an indication that there's a problem there. But getting really, really clear about those functions is going to enable you to compartmentalize what's happening in the business. And as you grow, you'll be able to understand not only how to measure success, but what you should be handing over. So number 1, we're going to go through a process and define the functions. Number 2 is underneath those functions, there's kind of usually a number of core systems, anything from 10, maybe 16, sometimes 20 systems. And the way I often explain these is it's a bit like, your body. Your body is on its own is obviously, an organism, but underneath that, there's different systems. I'm sure that's not the medical term, but anyway, underneath that, there are multiple systems. You've got your respiratory system. You've got cardiovascular system. You've got your nerve system. You've got lymph system. You've got the skeletal system. And the point is your business is no different. Underneath each of those departments, you've got groups of processes, which together I call a system, which enable your business to run. In your management function, you have a system that helps you manage the financial side of things. Within your marketing function, you've got a system that helps you manage partnerships. You've got a system that helps you market online. You might have a system that helps you ask for referrals and follow them up. In your sales function, you may have a system for converting leads to clients. You may have a system for onboarding clients from new clients to advocates. In your advice system, you might have a system for making sure your files are kept in the right order. You might have a system for making sure that your CPD points. You getting my sense? Identifying each of these systems, we can start to identify not only how many of them are under each area and what processes make them up, but more importantly, we can start to ask questions about who owns them. So number 3, we need to understand that there are core systems. Each of those will have a metric that defines when things are going well. Once we got those systems in place, once we know that you've got some marketing, a marketing function underneath that are 2 or 3 different ways you market, we can start to quantify some of the outcomes. Now, the truth is, I'll be really honest, when I look at some of the 90-day plans coming in, they're awesome, but some of the metrics in there are a little bit, should we say weak? They're soft. Now, we can talk about SMART, objectives, if you like. Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timely. In other words, they're things that you can actually put in a wheelbarrow, as I call it. If it's an example of, I'm going to bring on some new clients. That's a really soft metric. If you say, you know what, I'm going to bring on board a bunch of new clients I'm going to bring on board 12 new clients. I'm going to do that by generating 20 new leads, and I'm going to do it from running 3 Facebook campaigns. I'm going to do it by forming at least 1 new partnership, and I'm going to do it by consistently asking for referrals in 50% of meetings, which will make me, I'm asking for it 10 times a week. That's a really clear metric, and it's strong. The truth is that the reason why I really want to push this point, is if you have weak metrics, if you have weak quantified metrics, there's a good chance that your outcomes are going to be weak. A really classic example is CrossFit. One of the key things you'll notice is that CrossFit's all about measurables. A lot of the stuff around wearables and boot camps, they all include this really key component, which is about benchmarking. Now, for those people who look at it and go, CrossFit's for crazy people, I get it. There's a joke going that says, how do you know if someone's done CrossFit or does CrossFit? And the answer is because I'll tell you within the first 30 seconds of meeting them. But the reality is it's that measurement that makes a big difference. It gives you that point on the horizon to aim for. By the way, this is not about success and failure. I get that some people don't like coming along to the accelerators and putting it out there and laying it on the line and saying, I'm going to do this, because there's the risk that there's stuff you don't know. There's potential. Hey, Chris, how you going, man? There's stuff you don't know. There's potentially the risk of standing up there and not getting it done. But I can guarantee you, if you put it out there and you don't achieve your target, that's fine. I will sit down with you. People on the program will help you understand what was going wrong. But if you don't do it at all, you don't get the opportunity to put that light on the hill. Does that make sense? Even if it's just a pipe dream, I've had this consistent thing I've noticed over the years that people who, they actually put a number to it. They quantify it. They make it something that they can actually track for some strain, like Phil, marking a weight on a spreadsheet. It has this impact of focusing you. So the third one, and probably one of the most important things, is we want to make sure these are quantifiable, not just subjective, but ideally objective in some way, shape, or form. The fourth one I want to mention is we're going to assign ownership. We spoke about this already. There is huge power in giving something to someone and allowing them to personalize it. If you think about when people come in, if you work in a big office, you walk around an office, what do you notice about what people do to their desks, right? Well, you notice that people put photos on it. They put screensavers. They personalize their space. It's part of being human. We customize our iPhone. You'll notice whenever I go into business and I start talking to people in that business who work for the business, I can tell very, very quickly whether the people who work there actually believe in that business. And it's all to do with the words they use. People who aren't engaged, they talk about their business, the business they work for, as them or the business. One of the big corporations I worked for, that was very clear, particularly towards the end, where when you heard people speak about the organization, they spoke about it as if it was a separate person. Because people who are invested in business, you notice it. They talk about us and our team and our goals. And that's really the fundamental difference when people take ownership. You, as the business owner, can't be the one who makes it happen forever. You can't be the one that just tracks all the metrics. You can't be the one that does it all. So frankly, you may as well start now and start by getting people really clear about what they own and what they have the ability to influence, and asking them, that golden question, which is, if this is the purpose of this system and you own this system because you manage this function in the business, what do you think is a fair metric for us to measure your success against and make sure that not only are you getting the support you need and you've got the skills, but more importantly, we can recognize you when you nail it. Is that making sense? You still with me? Given all the tech challenges, just type a quick yes in the box if you're still loud and clear and you're hearing me. And I'll quickly pop that worksheet. Yes, love it. Hopefully this is useful. I've got a yep there. Right, let me pop that worksheet back in there again. Love it. Okay, let's go with the final one. This metric thing is about scale. Everything we do, I don't want to create a system that adds to what you already do. I want to create a system that makes it easier for you to move into the space you do. And as a result, if this is about scale, I don't want you to have to do the numbers forever. I want you to be the person being reported to. I want you to create a system that even if you're a one-man band, if you've got a small team, but over time, you can hand over certain elements and say, this is what I want you to come back with and tell me how we're going, because the person knows what this is about, what the purpose of what they're doing is, really clearly understand the processes involved, and finally, the metrics that you're expecting and how to track it. Is that cool? I hope so. Right. That is the principles. Let's get stuck into the model. There's a couple of models. Actually, I'll show you the first model. It's really simple. The progression of metrics. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take this from a state that most people are at right now to a state where this becomes natural. And the two things we need to measure is, the ease of tracking this stuff over time, how simple it's going to become. A lot of people spoke about getting the data. Where am I going to get the data from? That's only half the equation. The first equation is getting the data. And often, to be honest with you, getting the data isn't as hard as people think. The hard bit is actually getting the habit of getting people to have the conversation or submit the information or think about it. That's where the ease of tracking comes in. Because the reality is, to start with, most people, when it comes to their conversion rates or the leads they're generating or whatever it is they're trying to do, they are totally, and I know a lot of you will know this model. Chris, you'll know this model. You don't even know that you don't know. You're just going through, you don't know what's driving it. You are totally unaware, and it's fine because no one's actually sat down and gone, this is about this. At some point though, probably maybe off the back of this webinar or maybe before, you become aware that, there's some stuff that other people are tracking. There's some information, there's these dashboards on the internet. They're giving people information. And for some reason, I don't have that stuff. Or someone gives you a big fat report on your revenue and you look at it and go, I don't really know what this is about, but obviously they're spending money on it. I know I don't know. Exactly. Once you do that, maybe you start using the data. You look at it, but you have to really invest some time to understand what it's all about. So you become conscious. You're thinking about that. You're aware the data's there and you start to unpack it. But it takes a lot. And eventually you're going to get to a point, where you're just tracking it naturally and you're just interpreting it and you can look at what it means. I was down in Canberra with Zoraida and one of Zoraida's good friends. This was last weekend. Yeah. We were chatting about this really interesting topic, which is, how come I can sit down and read through some legal documents and, I still don't get it. And it takes me hours. And I don't understand how lawyers, the amount of reading. Yeah. The amount of reading you have to do as a lawyer, that must be just mind-blowing. And he said, actually, no. You know what? When you're starting out, you can read through a document and it'll take you hours to understand it. And then after a year, you can read through it in half the time. And then after a year, and then eventually you get to a point where you just look at it and you know what that is. You know what that is. You know what that is. That's different. I'll focus on that. That's kind of where we're trying to get to with the metrics. We're looking to get to a place where we're kind of at the Warren Buffett level. You can open a company report, skip through all the stuff, and it just bang, what's that there? You start to notice the patterns or the differences in the patterns rather than having to consciously think, what does this mean? What impact does that have? That's where we're trying to get to. There's another really important model I wanted to sort of point out while we're here as well. And particularly given a bit of the conversation that's gone on today about a couple of things. So some people have spoken about, tracking the outcomes, which I kind of call top level stuff, like the dollars we're bringing in, the AUM or the funds under management we're bringing in, the number of new clients or leads. Do that stuff's important. And I think it's always key to keep a track of that. But here's the thing. I think if you just track those outcomes, you're kind of missing half of the story. Anyone who's come along to an accelerator will know there's that point where we start to plan out how we're going to do the plans. And I always raise the fact that, process is often more important, at least equally important, often more important than just knowing the outcome. I trot out the sayings that comes from sports people who say, when I'm out on the golf course, I'm not focused on whether I'm going to shoot birdie or par or one under when I'm sitting in front of a hole. I'm just focused on the process. Is my stance right? Have I got the right grip? Am I relaxed? And that's what, when you focus on the outcome, you're kind of just looking at, I'm going to shoot par. The thing I really want to know often is what's the activity that's going to drive that outcome. So if you're trying to bring in revenue, what's the activity that's going to drive revenue? Well, it might be new client meetings. It might be hitting fee levels, hitting fee targets, or hitting your fee model. Fun. It might be the right type of clients. Leads. It might be as simple as number of touch points, marketing touch points, or partnership touch points. Right. That's kind of the stuff that whenever I talk to a young planner or any planner for that matter, and they're not hitting their targets, I go deep. I go, okay, if you're not hitting the targets, I want to talk about the stuff that you're doing underneath it. Because 9 times out of 10, if the activity is not happening, if they're not going out and meeting partners, if they're not sending marketing material, if they're not having new client meetings, if they're not hitting their fee levels, if they're not actually, pitching at that level, it's just not going to happen. And I guess the last bit is if the activity is happening and the outcomes aren't happening, there's only one thing left, and that's the approach is wrong. In other words, the meeting is too long or too short, or it's not being closed correctly, or they don't understand the fee model, or they haven't been able to work out how to explain the fees, or their marketing is targeting the wrong people. In other words, it's a skills issue. And again, if you chat to a planner and they're not hitting the targets and they're doing the work and they don't have the right skill set and you can't improve it, that's the point at which sooner or later you turn around and say, thanks, but this might not be for you. So for those of you who are managing advisor metrics, understand that this is key. But this assumes that people know how to do that. It also assumes that they are organized and productive enough to focus on that stuff. And of course, if you are managing a team and you identify that they are doing that stuff, you've got a skills issue. And really, you've got a decision as to whether you want to train or whether potentially got the wrong person. Is that cool? When it comes to advice business, I think there's probably 8 functions. You can have more. And if you really, really feel this isn't right for your business, then go for it. But I think really, if you break it down, there's 8 areas that really exist. The first one is management. Anybody out there who is a pure manager of a business, this is making sure that everything else that's happening, the money's coming in, the strategy's right, the planning's done, all that sort of stuff, for me, sits under the management function. Marketing. In other words, getting out there and putting the word out to existing clients and new clients. I reckon there's a department around conversion. And whether you call it sales or conversion or new clients, whatever it is, it's about the work that goes on once the client has reached out to your business, who goes through your first appointment, your new client engagement process, and then gets onboarded. There's an advice areas. Very, very quick, Chris. There's an advice piece. In other words, making sure that, what you're actually delivering as your product, being the knowledge, the expertise applied to other people's situation to get a result, is top quality and all the record keeping's in place. There's client management stuff, looking after your clients ongoing. There is the operational stuff, making sure your business and your back office runs like clockwork. IT, looking after your systems, making sure all the data is good. And finally, HR, hiring and managing people. Anyone got any others they'd want to add in there, or do they think that covers pretty much everything? If there are, pop it in the box. I'd love to know. Do you have any additional areas in your business? Or questions, by the way, along the way about what sits where? If not, we'll just move on. But if you do have any, come along. So those are the functions. I'm going to give you those ones. Good. Okay, great. All right. The next one is systems. And as I mentioned, if the function is kind of a department, then the systems are the groups of processes that sit underneath that department. Within management, I usually think there's 3 main ones. There is the financial management piece, paying the bills, producing the financial reporting, people process profit. Yeah, love it. Yeah. There is the planning, sitting down and setting your plan, creating a vision, putting in place a 9-day plan, making sure that everybody knows where we're headed. And then there's systematizing. In other words, making sure that whatever you're doing as a business is getting turned into repeatable processes and then put into your workflow. Any others you can think of, pop them in the box. But those for me are the big 3 that I tend to think about. As a manager of people, as a manager of the business, not a manager of people, as a CEO or a general manager, that's the kind of the areas that I think are most important. In the marketing space, well, this is where you can get a bit of variation. I've put 5 in here. There could be more, but I think ultimately your marketing systems will be your online marketing system. If you run, if you do content marketing, if you do Facebook adverts, if you do LinkedIn marketing, if you do outreach, all of this sort of stuff, if you do blogging, there are processes that make up your system for getting your content created, put out there, and shared. Love that one too, Chris. That's good. Partnership marketing. Your process for reaching out to people and working with other businesses in order to bring in leads. Events. If you run webinars or seminars or any sort of client-facing event, or even like a networking group, then you'd have a process and you'd have a system, series of processes for getting people in the room, inviting them, setting up, managing it, following up. Referral marketing. The process of asking clients consistently in your business to send through people, your scripts. And also the digital assets. You'd have maybe an online website. You might have your blog, etc. Managing that and making sure your workflow, all that sort of stuff. In the conversion space, I think this one's probably easier. You've essentially got a new client engagement system, that 15-minute phone call into your 1-hour discovery session, strategy session, whatever you call it, into a sign-up, terms of engagement, onboarding, etc. You've got your onboarding, your 90-day, 12-step process for kind of inducting clients, telling them where everything is and telling them how to work. In the advice space, I think you've got a compliance system for making sure that checks and balances are made. You've got your file maintenance system for making sure that the files are either scanned or kept in a good order and everything's in place and they're checked. You've got your FDS system. And maybe you've got your CPD system, for making sure that everybody's professional development is tracked. You've probably got some other stuff around your registers, or they may sit under as a sub-process within the compliance area. When it comes to client management, I think you've got your service delivery system, whether that's the personal touch thing, making sure that everyone's on target there, whether it's about delivering your newsletters, whether it's about booking in reviews. You've got a retention system for making sure that you are retaining clients, you're bringing them back on board. And you've probably got a system for analyzing lifetime value. In other words, making sure that whatever your clients are paying over time is sufficient for not only that they get value, but more equally importantly, that you create a profitable ongoing business. And particularly important if you've got a business that potentially what you're offering up front as a loss leader, whatever it might be. In your operations, I really simplify this when I say you've got an operating rhythm. In other words, you've got a way that you work together as a business. That might be a quarterly planning session, an annual 3-day offsite. It might be your Monday check-in, your Friday check-in. You might be your system for sharing 10 minute, this is what I'm working on today. It's that operating rhythm that someone needs to make sure happens. And then your pipeline meetings where you get together and talk about what's in the pipeline. And then a project delivery system. In other words, making sure that whatever your 90-day plans are, they're included in the workflow coming forward. In your IT space, you probably have systems that are around systems integrity, making sure that people are using the software tools, the X-Plan or the workflow tool as intended and following the processes. And you've got your data integrity, going in on a regular basis and double checking to make sure that the data that's in your CRM is good and good quality. And HR, you've probably got 2 systems here. Hiring good people, your process for putting adverts out, vetting them, interviewing people, and then the way that you make offers to them, and then finally performance. How you make sure that your staff are actually performing and coach them along the way. Makes sense? Have I missed any, by the way? Please jump in. I've tried to keep it as comprehensive, but also not try to go too deep on this. I would suspect that if most of you focused on those systems alone, you would pretty much nail 90% of what was there. Cool. So next thing we want to do is, once we've got clear on the function and the system, we probably want to, before we can come to a place where we talk about KPI, we need to get clear about the purpose. So in the management section, what's the purpose of a financial management system? Well, it's healthy cash flow, isn't it? It's being able to pay the bills and take profit and navigate any problems. Planning is all about setting right priorities and direction. And in systematization, it's all about capturing the repeatable IP. For me, online marketing is about generating leads online. Partnership is all about generating quality partnerships that also generate leads as a secondary thing. Events, running world-class events. Referral marketing, turn advocacy into leads. Digital assets, making our online presence awesome. Again, these are the kind of things that when you're very clear about what you're trying to drive for the people who you're going to assign these things to, then it gets easier. Conversion, new client engagement, simple, turning leads into clients. For onboarding, turning new clients into advocates. When we're talking about advice, compliance is about making sure compliant is also equals commercial. I think that's really important. Compliance alone, without the commercial side of things, is just not a great thing. Keeping great records for farm maintenance. FDS is maximizing opt-in and keeping people educated, the CPD. Client management, your purpose might be for service delivery is delivering ongoing value to clients. Retention might be keeping great clients longer and ideally getting rid of the ones who aren't great. And lifetime value might be ensuring our ongoing business rocks. No problem yet. Jens? Chris, thanks for joining us, man. Etc. I'll go through this bit by bit, but you get the idea. Operations is about making sure we work well together, and the project delivery is making sure business improvements happen. IT, system segments, is about keeping systems functioning, as data is about making sure the data is clean and complete. And finally, see you, man. Hiring is about finding great people, and performance is about making sure performance turns into results. Now, I know this seems really, really straightforward, but you wouldn't believe how many businesses sort of approach this without being really, really clear about what they're trying to do. So I think, if you just fill in these first 3 columns, you're going to be fairly well further progressed than most businesses out there when it comes to planning. But now we get to the fun bit, and this is going to be interactive. So jump in. Once you're clear that the financial side of the business is actually about healthy cash flow, you can start to talk about what are the KPIs, for management. It might be simple as, what's our profit target? What's our cash flow target? What kind of profit do we want to have at the end of each month? What kind of profit do we want to have at the end of the year? In terms of another KPI, you might want to know a bit about the growth drivers. It's all very well to look at it and go, our business grew by 15% last year. But you might want to know as an advisor, where did that growth come from? Did it come from new clients? Did it come from growth in insurance revenue? Did it come from some unusual event that wasn't necessarily to do with us, but we're going to assume it is? Looking under the data, particularly when it comes to the growth in ongoing revenue versus the growth in new revenue. What kind of advice? Are people coming in and getting advice on self-managed super funds, or is it insurance advice? That can really help you understand whether you're a boat that's rising with the tide, or whether this is because of something deliberate you've actually done. Revenue distribution. This is all about that, that bell curve. Looking at your revenue and going, great, now I know where the revenue is, but where does it sit? Do I have most of my revenue coming from a certain age group? And is that a problem? Should that influence the way that I grow the business? Should I bring on board younger clients? Or alternatively, do I need to start working on an offer to retain them long term? And finally, gross margin, which is just understanding the specifics of what sits underneath that. In other words, what is your actual profit margin across the business? Making sense so far? Is everyone still with me? Cool. Let's keep going. Marketing. Oh, by the way, net profit is the other one in there. Okay, let's talk about marketing. Online marketing, partnership marketing, events. What else you could do is some of the KPIs are qualified leads. You know what? You could track leads. Don't get me wrong. Tracking leads is good, but I'm more interested in the number of leads that are actually good leads for you. They meet your target market. They're coming from the right place. They're asking the right questions. In other words, you might track the number of people who express an interest, and then you might track the number of people who actually turn out to be good quality leads. I'm more interested in your conversion rate from good quality leads than I am from everybody. If you're generating 20 leads a month and you're only converting 5 of them, that's a pretty terrible conversion rate. But if that turns out that only 5 of those leads are people who you can help and need your advice and all the rest of it, then that's a very different kettle of fish. Web traffic, really important. If you're going down a web traffic path, I think the target you need to have for your website is 1,000 unique hits a month. If you've got 1,000 unique hits a month, your average conversion rate, depending on the quality of what's on your site, should be around 2.5% is usually the average. So in other words, if you're hitting 1,000 leads a month, you've got 20 to 25 people who are going to be signing in to your list in other words, to be marketed to. There's a good chance of that 20 to 25 that 20 to 30% of them will be ready to engage with you. So you can kind of see that if you start tracking web traffic and you're hitting that 1,000, you're starting to get close to a place where you can actually start to play with some of what's on your site, the content, the conversion stuff. You might want to track sales growth, the specifics of where your actual sales numbers are growing. Consistency. This is one around marketing. This comes down to that activity thing. If you're not sure whether your social media is having an effect, one of the first things I'd look at is how consistently am I or my team posting? In other words, are you posting weekly? Are you posting fortnightly? Are you sometimes posting weekly and then leaving it for 3 weeks and not coming back to it? Marketing, and particularly content marketing and even partnership marketing, frankly. If you're not a regular fixture in someone's head or in someone's inbox, and you're sporadic, and particularly if your themes are all over the place as well, then there's a good chance you're making it hard for yourself. And then finally is the cost of customer acquisition. I might have a bit of a play with this one. Now, I know this is super hard to track for a lot of advice businesses because a lot of the time there is a bunch of activity that goes in on the top. But the kind of thing that we're talking about is, you know what? If you are running Facebook adverts, or even if you're investing in an event, I'd actually redo that. In other words, there's a marketing spend here. We'll do an offline version because I know a lot of you aren't doing online marketing. But let's say we run an event. And let's say the cost of doing that event is $10,000, right? And we'll put in a bit of work because obviously you have to put some time in there, to book a speaker. Or let's say you're a total event. That's a pretty expensive event, but we get the idea. Let's say 150 people come to your event. The average cost of, actually, let's make that 15 because that would make it really easy. Let's just make it 100. Let's do this. Okay. If you got 100 people to come to your event, what's the per person cost of running your event? You got 20,000, it's $200 a person, right? Yeah, cool. If then off the back of that spend, you get 10 leads, your cost per lead is $2,000 for that lead. You with me? If then your conversion rate is 50%, so 5 of those people become clients, then your cost of customer acquisition is $4,000, if that makes sense. And this is a really important thing that people track, particularly when monitoring online, because if you're going to spend a bunch of money on Facebook advertising and they come through and they join your list and then a certain number, then knowing this number is a really important part of understanding whether you're making money up front. Because don't forget, most businesses just track the cost to actually deliver advice to the client. But if you add that in there as well as a cost of customer acquisition piece, you start to have a better metric around whether the marketing you're doing is worthwhile or not. You start to think about marketing events as being, well, what's the best bang for buck, if that makes sense. Cool. I hope that was useful. So I wanted to explain a bit on this one because cost of customer acquisition is something that's really common in the online space, but not elsewhere. I've got about 5 minutes left, so stick with me on this. The other things you do is referrals. The number of referrals coming through, that's an obvious one. Attendance. If you're running events, I'd be tracking your attendance, particularly if you're running webinars. You start to notice drops, that could indicate something is amiss. And the list growth. I think this is really important. If any of you are doing online marketing and you're not capturing email addresses to market to, please start doing it. And please, let's talk about that. But the growth in your list is key, because for all the advertising on social media, once they're on your list, you have a free marketing opportunity. And frankly, I see more conversions from people's list as content marketers than anywhere else. In conversion, we've spoken about cost of customer acquisition is as useful as tracking here. Frankly, if you're spending $2,000 a lead and your conversion rates suck, and it's just because at that point you're converting really low numbers, as you can see, that can add up to a pretty big cost. Conversion rates, obviously, and sales growth is another area I would track there, as in the growth specifically from new sales across various different areas. In advice, obviously the big one there is to track your audit scores, things like CPD completion rates. I'm sure most of our licensees are all over that. But I want to put this in there that some people talk about, what should I do in terms of checking? You may notice that the boys in blue, the police, they're very specific about how they market some of their harm prevention, and they're always about random checks. And they do this because random checks are the one thing that motivates everybody the most. If you don't know when the check's coming, you don't know when the car could be pulling you up, you don't know when the doping authorities are going to come and check your urine, it encourages you to stick to the straight and narrow, as opposed to, if it's a monthly check or a bi-monthly check, guess what happens? Most cases, we know it's coming, so we only perform the behavior at that particular time. So if you're going to go down this area where you're looking to check files or check SOAs or check data integrity, random is the best. And there's a whole bunch of randomizing tools on the internet you could use to kind of randomize your reminders. Let's talk about client management. Retention rate is a big one. In other words, look at your client base. If you want to segment it and go active clients, inactive clients, insurance clients, then do it. But I think on a regular basis, you should be asking yourself the question, particularly if you're sitting on a legacy book, ask yourself the question, what's my drop-off rate? Because your drop-off rate will tell you a whole bunch of stuff around customer lifetime value. In other words, the length of time they're staying with you, as well as give you some information whether you should be focusing on that as a marketing opportunity or not. Net Promoter Score. Does anybody not know what Net Promoter Score is? If you don't know what it is and you want to know more, type in yes, please, and I'll explain it really quickly. But if not, I'll assume everybody's heard it before. I don't know. Okay. Net Promoter Score. It's really simple. By the way, I'm speaking to a group called mynextadvice.com.au who specialize in doing automated client feedback surveys. I'm going to find out a bit more about it, but you might be of interest. They've got a 30-day trial. If any of you are interested in surveying your client base and getting some of this stuff. So Net Promoter Score, NPS, is done on a scale of 1 to 10. So I'll just write these up. 3, 4, 5. So you send out a survey to clients going, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? Or how awesome do you think we are? Generally, what's recognized is if you mark 9 or 10, these are what are called promoters, net promoters, actually. In other words, there are people that will actively go out and tell their friends about you, how awesome you are, and likely recommend you. If you've got 7 or 8, these are neutrals. They're people who don't think they don't think anything wrong with you, but they're not exactly battling down the hatches. They're not exactly screaming down the building to talk about how amazing you are. Anyone under here, they're your detractors. They're not happy. Now, I know you think about, well, hold on, that's a big space at the bottom and not at the top, but think about it. To actually recommend and be happy with someone's service and to recommend it, you've got to be pretty happy. 7 or 8 is kind of where both of us, we don't want to be polite. We don't want to turn around and say, you know what, you're a 6. 6 and below is where we're sent to notice that somebody's actually actively, you do know this perfectly. So Net Promoter Score, if you're sending something out and your aim is to know who are promoters and who's likely to drop off, that's why we use Net Promoter Score. Okay, let's keep going. Just remember every time I switch, that's annoying. Okay, what else we got? In terms of operations, now this is a good one. If you've got an operational team and using workflow, the kind of things I'd be tracking are missed milestones. In other words, one of the things we started doing is tracking, if we have certain periods where we need to get worksheets done or we need to get work completed, and that's a workflow piece in the system, key things, get the accelerator booked, and we start to miss those, get the client's insurance implemented, get the SOA produced, get the FDSs out, whatever that might be. If you start to know, get reviews booked, if you start to notice that those milestones are being missed, that's a metric. And your metric could be around, 90% of milestones are delivered on time. In other words, and you would use your workflow system to track this. Travel cost is another one. If you've got someone who's booking your travel, you can get an idea of whether they're doing it correctly depending on, how much traveling you're doing and the cost of it. Team meetings. Are your team meetings occurring? Your metric could be, I want 100% or 95% of team meetings to happen each month as scheduled. And if people start dropping off and they start not coming along, you notice that that's a metric. Late tasks. I drop into teamwork at least twice a week and I ask how many late tasks we got. If that number is over a certain proportion, then I know that someone's dropping the ball and we need to have a conversation about their delivery. And query resolution. If you've got an email tracking system, you can start to ask how many emails are sat in there being unresolved. And I know that a number of shared inboxes can actually tell you the length of time, including Intercom does it. I believe Missive does it, and others inboxes can tell you who's responding, how often they're responding, how quickly they're responding, and whether they're responding first time. In IT space, we've already talked about random data checks. Go in, grab some entry from your CRM. Is the data correct? Are the dates of birth correct in there? You can actually go in there and look at clients' file notes. Are they looking good? Are the file notes all there? Have they uploaded the things? If not, again, that's a KPI. Usage of systems. Look on the system logs. We do it regularly with our members site. Who's logging in? Who's looking at the right stuff? Who's not? And finally, uptime. If you've got IT in there, is your website actually up? We recently got a refund from our IT provider that we left because the uptime was terrible. In the HR space, as well as performance, which is kind of up there, some of the things you can measure, again, is employee satisfaction. And it's probably something that's worth doing, probably at least every 6 months. Just ask, how are people going? And give them a bit of a net promoter score. So hopefully this has been useful. The final thing is I want to ask a couple of questions. And maybe this is the bit where we can actually leave here with a little bit of the work done. Hopefully, if you've done this right, you'll have identified what your systems are, maybe written some of them down. If not, I will send you through the notes or this. You start to get an idea of what the purpose are. Hopefully, you started to maybe put into those boxes some of those KPIs that are relevant to you. But I want you to right now, I want you to spend 2 minutes and write down who the owners are of each of those functions in your business. So for us, I'll start you off. The management function, well, that's me. I'm responsible for the financial performance. Damn. I'm responsible for the planning, and I'm responsible for making sure that the work gets done. That's Stu. In the marketing space, that's Rose. She's responsible for the qualified leads. She's responsible for web traffic. She's responsible for sales growth, all that sort of stuff. In the conversion space, that's me. I'm responsible for making sure that new clients are engaged and we bring on board the right people. In the advice space, in my space, it's coaching. Again, that's me. I'm responsible for that. Client management, that's Rach. She's responsible for making sure that people are looked after. Operations, that's Rach for the time being. It was Nina. IT, Rose, and HR is definitely Rach. So you notice here, in our case, there's a pretty even spread. And that's really important. Because again, that bit we spoke about at the end on getting people to take ownership, if a member of your team, there's no member of your team that owns at least one area, then potentially you've got somebody who is maybe sitting on the sidelines a bit more. So I'd love to know, as the person who's coming along to this session today, Brett, Elizabeth, Jason, Michael, Zoraida, I'd love to know, there's 8 boxes there. How many do you own? Just pop it in the box and let me know how many of those boxes have got your name on them. That'll give me an idea of how centric your business is and maybe the opportunity you have to actually get clients and get your team involved in taking on board some of it. Michael's got 5. Cool. Jason's got 3. Guys, that's all of them. So maybe you want to sit down and think about, I know it's early days, but you might want to talk to Tanya about taking a couple of them. Brett, 4. That's good, man. That's really good. Cool. And Zoraida, Elizabeth, what about you? Elizabeth, yours is probably going to be 8, but I reckon sooner rather than later, and certainly in the operations space, probably in a bit of the marketing space, we probably want to be handing some of those. Cool. That's good. 7. And one's half and half. That's perfect. Zoraida, love to know what about you? Because I think this is key for you, in particular. Cool. A question about functions. Well, then I won them all. Okay, you won them all. Michael, let's bring you up. Okay, I can hear you. Michael, can you hear me? Dude, yeah. What's your question?
Mate, so in the functions, that advice function is broadly looking at things like compliance and broadly looking at compliance. Where does the advice process, giving advice, strategy management, that type of stuff, where does that capability?
So anything to do with new clients, from the point they're a lead to the point they're onboarded and the advice is delivered as a process, I'd put it in conversion. Anything to do with delivering ongoing service and reviews I'd put it in here. So I kind of see SOA sits in here. Strategy session, it's a subset of that system. Does that make sense?
Okay.
With service delivery, this would be your, if you're using the personal touch service model, it would sit under there. This would be your reviews, would sit under here.
What about things like, let's say we wanted to broaden the scope of advice that we give to include something like SMSF? I'm trying to think. I'm thinking more slightly about the product or the service offering.
So this is.
I'm trying to across this.
This is I'd say that client management is the stuff where you're actually managing, you're engaging the process for actually making sure that you're staying on top of it with clients. When you're talking about the technical side of things, in other words, the staying up to date on things, the actual making sure that the advice you're giving, the advice documents, all that sort of stuff, that for me sits in the advice space.
Okay, cool.
So I kind of think about, if you think about the advice, your product is the advice. It's the ability for you to deliver the information that's in your head in such a way that you put it in front of people, and it's it's in their best interest. You got all that stuff in there. The advice is your product. The client management is the mechanism by which you're able to work with clients, retain them, deliver the face-to-face stuff, and basically make sure that part of your business is profitable. That's kind of how I think about it. Does that make sense to you though?
It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah. I think it's the word conversion, which didn't quite ring with me around the advice process, but I think actually that's not a bad way to think about it. That makes some sense. So
if you wanted to make that new clients, you want to call it new business, if you want to call it client engagement, whatever's right for you. The labels are just what I put in place, and it is actually really important that this aligns. If you already talk about these functions a certain way in your business, don't take these wording I've used. Take the wording that you've already used. As long as this talks about being a general manager, that talks about getting leads and bringing people in. That talks about once they're in, making them into clients. Talks about the stuff that we're seeing right here and now in the Royal Commission, which is making sure that whatever you're delivering to clients is the best quality, thought leadership that you can. This is about the processes for actually engaging with them. This is about the back office stuff. This is about the tech, and that's about managing the people.
Yeah, cool. Okay, awesome. Yeah, right. That's good. Thanks.
Sweet, no problem. Thank you. Okay, hopefully that was useful. Just love to know what useful insight has what we've been speaking about hopefully given you into what's going on there? Oh, right. Why are you still showing your camera? That's weird. Okay, disable talking. There we go. What insight has this given to you into your approach to metrics, if any? We'd just love to know, is there any light bulbs? Is there any hot spots we've hit? Anything useful? Another thing is, if you were describing this webinar to someone else who said, should I go along to this? What would you say is the thing you would say has been most useful for you that you would express to them? Would love to know from your perspective. What useful insight has this given you? Or maybe it's confirmed what you already know. It's just made it clearer. Or maybe it's done none of the above. But love to get a bit of feedback. What's it given you in terms of insight? Other than sometimes the technology doesn't do what it's supposed to do. What insight has this given you into your metrics, into the way you manage it? Pop it in the box, let me know, and then I'll give you next steps. Key takeout from Jason is to give the team more team ownership and benefit from their skills more. Yeah, I think that's a good one. We talk about the racing line, and one of the key things is those 3 week period that we have after you come out of the accelerator is there for a really specific reason. It's there for you to get clear on what the plan is, and equally as important to engage your team. So Ryder says the different functions, clearly allocate them and start to think of, I love that. Start to think about your business as a big business now, even if that's further along. Oh, Elizabeth says, this is the best ever. Love that. Actually draws everything together and puts metrics in context. Thank you so much. Perfect. Brett, if you have any thoughts, would love to share in yours as well. Cool. Should we talk about next steps? Off the back of this, there's really 2 things that you can do to take it forward. I think if you want to do this, you want to implement this fast, the 3 things you can do is kind of start by just grabbing this and firming up your metrics. Having a look and ask the question, what are the really key things? Brett, perfect, man. Having systematization is going to be all important if and when I leave current licensee. Yeah. And the other thing is whether you go to a new licensee or whether you get your own license, if you can pop this on the table and go, this is how my business operates. These are the systems and processes, and this is how we measure things. That sends out a really clear message to whoever you're coming into that, you know what, these guys have got their stuff together. They're probably less of a risk than somebody who's coming in going, show me where the sales training is. Joke. Firm up your metrics. Look at what you're doing right now and ask some questions. Can I get a bit harder on that stuff? If you want to, resubmit it to me. Refocus on what you need to get done. It's never too late to go, you know what? That metric about new clients is a bit weak. That metric about marketing was a bit weak. They've got a new one. And if you want to do it now, have that team conversation. Have it this week, or this week might be a bit late, but have the conversation. Set yourself up for next week. Sit down with the team and say, I want to sit down and talk to you all about how I want us to think about our business and the metrics that are important, and get their feedback. You know, this is what I think. You might even go in there with those first 2 columns ready to go and an idea of the third and fourth, but invite them to have some feedback. You know, what do you think success looks like in this space? What do you think we should commit to, and what will the KPI be? Longer term, action-wise, here's what I would be thinking about. I would definitely be thinking about finding your core systems, you know, grouping together all those tools and templates and whatnot into those systems, and getting really, really clear about who owns those things. Because as you systematize, if you have a lot more processes flying around there, it gets harder and harder to group them. Design the longer term expansion. If you are ambitious and you want to grow, or even if you're not ambitious, you don't want to grow, you just want to work less, then design that experience. By the way, the 2 things are exactly the same. If you want to spend less time in your business, build a business that has greater capacity, and then just don't have as many clients in there. Number 3, develop a recruitment plan. If you're going to bring people on board to take over these functions, you can start to ask, what's the most important function that I don't want to be doing a year from now? If it's operations, Elizabeth, you got a clear idea of what kind of systems are going to sit under there, for example. If it's an advisor, then you get a clear idea of what you need to hand over to them. And the other thing is, if you are looking at this through the spectrum of advisor bonuses, well, guess what? You've got a bunch of metrics in there to decide whether the advisor you've got on board is a client, someone you want to go out and market, whether it's an advisor that you want to focus on new client engagement or conversion, whether it's a client that, you know, an advisor you want to have some sort of advice metrics, which is probably a damn good idea, or whether they are a servicing advisor, in which case you know what that's all about. And that model around outcome, activity, and the approach is really useful there for coaching. You know, if someone's not hitting targets, it's time to have a conversation about activity. If they're doing the activity and they're not having targets, it's time to have a conversation about either training or skill sets. And by the way, if you find someone in your team is deficient in an area of skills and we can help out, let me know. I'll give them access to the member site, and I will encourage them to come along to a drop-in, and we can sort something out in that space. So that's all I wanted to cover off today. I hope you enjoyed that. I've been really wanting to do this for a while, because I think whilst it's not the sexiest of topics, it is one of the most important. And I think the bigger you grow as a business and the more you sort of bring on board people and you want to perform, giving them a target to aim at, giving them clarity around, what you need from them, giving them ownership, and equally importantly, being able to look at what's going on in the business with some very clear understanding of what the targets are, and really look forward and go, you know what, if we continue to do it this way, we're going to get this result. Or more importantly, get to a point where you know darn well that if you run this marketing campaign and you convert this way, or you deliver reviews, this is the outcome you get. So hopefully this has been useful. If it has, and you got questions, please please feel free to drop them in there. I know I've gone over, but I appreciate you sticking around. Alternatively, if there are no questions, final thing I'm going to say is it's a really interesting discussion, well, a few interesting discussions going on all over the place. XY Advisor, there's some bit of biff going on there, all about that story about the Westpac SMSF thing. That was an interesting one. But a discussion got going on the Facebook group yesterday around, what should we do at this point in time around communicating with clients? My view is really clear. Last time we got hit by something like this was probably Compare the Pair, which was a devastatingly simple message, which was also freakishly inaccurate. Now, it's based on the idea that advice adds no value, which we've seen study after study indicate it does. Now, I think the alternative is here is the problem there is when that Compare the Pair came out, it took so long for us as an industry, and in particular our industry bodies, to respond, that we lost the right to reply. And when we did, our response was so convoluted and long-winded, it didn't stand a chance. Right here and now, there are a bunch of accusations flying around, none of which have anything to do with you. You aren't the executive who lied 20 times to ASIC. You are not your licensee. You are not the paraplan who signed off on this. You're not the advisor who thought it's okay to recommend a self-managed super fund to buy a property people couldn't afford and couldn't live in. You are not any of those people. And I think there is a real argument for saying getting something out right here and now, not to be defensive, not to criticize, but to be that lighthouse in the fog and really say to people, I want to remind people, this is what we're all about. this is the way that we work, I think is an opportunity. So there is a thread on the Facebook group, which I've put some thoughts, and I've also put a letter template. It's really up to you. And by the way, if you're going to send this out, I don't know your licensing restrictions. I don't know what you can and can't send out. I don't know the intricate details of every element of your business as well as you do. So the disclaimer is, this is something that you need to be comfortable that is appropriate for you to send out. But I would encourage you, if you have the ability to communicate with your clients and really let them know that you, for the most part, have a problem with much of what's going on as much as they do, and this is how you view it through the context of your business, I think there's an opportunity there. So again, Facebook thread there. Love any feedback you have, by the way, if you think it's over the top or whatever. Anyway, cool. I will catch you all next week. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Hopefully that's given you a bit of insight into this whole murky world that can be metrics. And hopefully it's given you a bit of insight into some areas that you can track, or maybe you're already doing this and it's just trying to confirm what you've done. Anyway, that was Metrics That Matter. And if you'd like more, other than sitting here and listening to the podcast, please head over to our Practice Success community, success.ourdairy.com.au, and come on in and join us. Come along to a live event and just be part of it. That's it from me. As always, check out our website for upcoming events you might want to come along to, or just stay tuned for the next episode of The Finnovator. Once again, thank you so much for being a listener.